let's talk about Michael J. Fox and how you became part of this project and how you became part of his world.
About 3 years ago, I was sequestered in Martha's Vineyard, sad, depressed, in a rut, both personally. My kids were getting older and leaving the house. Professionally, I felt like I was making the same film over and over again. And I read an interview with him, and there's something in the way he described a horrible, traumatic moment in his life that was witty and funny and offered something to me. So I read all his books, and his books have books on tape, so I listened to his books, and the way he talks is so incredible that a lot of that is in the movie. So as there's story in here. Let's make a movie.
I think it's really easy to have made this film as just either just straight up hagiography, I forget how to say it.
I don't know how to say it either.
Yeah, exactly. Hagiography, right?
Yeah.
The straight masturbatory, whichever way you want to look at it. Or it becomes a sob story. It becomes let's feel bad for this guy who got this incredible affliction at a certain point of his career. He does none of that, and you do none of that as a filmmaker. Wondering if you could talk about the sort of pitfalls that you avoided in being, let's say, too saccharine or too prosaic about his condition, but still showing the truth of it all.
So much of it is him. I mean, he refuses to be seen differently. Mm-hmm. Some of it is understanding the baggage that the audience brings with them when they come to this. And so there's a breakthrough we had in the editing room when, he wakes up in his house and his hand is shaking when he's brushing his teeth. And you see him wake up and his feet are tight and you go, oh, here's the movie I thought I was going to see. This is one of those movies. And then I say, is this the story about the sad sack story of a guy who gets Parkinson's and it crushes him? And he looks and he says, that's boring. And to me, that was important to put up front, to subvert the expectation that this is a movie that's going to pity him. And I've heard him in Q&A say that pity is a benign form of abuse. Mm. And so you pity someone, yeah. And thank you. And but he's that way. He refuses to be seen other than that same guy who's moving fast from spot to spot.
I think one of the things that the film does for those of us that grew up through this era is it gives a sense of really how big of a star he was. And let's just take that and multiply it for these sort of crazy narcissistic Canadianness, is that we saw him as ours doing this. Yeah. And we saw something incredibly special. And he still has this direct connection to who he came from and where he came from. Right. Wondering if you could talk about visiting that, because again, you've seen the bad version of this movie hundreds of times. Yeah. And so you've obviously been doing this long enough, but more importantly, are really obviously objectively aware of what not to do in making a film like that. So I'm wondering if you can articulate specifically what one avoids in doing this kind of film.
Well, first of all, I feel like as a culture, we're bad at complexity. Mm. We say Donald Trump is this, we say healthcare is that, we say Parkinson's is this, and I think what I crave when I watch a movie is complexity, mm-hmm. and make him real, and the details, make him real, make him human, make him flawed, show every facet, and that's the gift of a long-form movie. Humor is incredible. Like, that's what I learned in this movie, is that humor is another layer of truth. I dismissed, my impression of him was funny guy, mm-hmm. handsome funny guy, but he has the humor is I think a sophisticated form of intelligence, and I'm not really answering your question.
No,
but
the bad version is humorless. The bad version is focusing either on the negativity or downplaying the negativity.
Yeah,
you allow him to laugh in the darkest moments.
Yeah, I think that's right, and he does that. And the other interesting thing is that he drops out of high school. 3 years later, he's got the top 2 movies grossing in America and the #1 TV show. He's 21 years old. He wanted to be famous and rich. He did not want to be a role model. He had no idea that this would happen to him. I'm fascinated by that. That life pushed him into this direction, like go this direction, and then he ran the other direction. He did everything he could to do the wrong thing before he did the right thing. To me, that's really interesting. So to answer your question, it's character work. It's just It's doing the detailed work to draw him as a complex human.
One of the things that you do is you obviously have recreations and used very creatively and in sometimes quite emotionally powerful ways. But you also use his performances out of context from his other films to help tell his story, sort of inadvertently recontextualizing. Retconning is the nerd term.
What is it called?
Retcon. So when you retroactively remake...
That's what I was doing. From the beginning, I was going to retcon.
Yeah, there you go.
How do I spell that?
Exactly. So when basically what you're doing is you're taking his films and giving them an entire new life, an entire new context. When he's running, now he's running away from his past or running away from his diagnosis.
So the editor who worked with me on this is a guy from Donegal, Ireland, Michael Hart. He edited this movie, Three Identical Strangers, if anyone's seen it. Yeah. And also Don't Fuck with Cats. Also kind of brilliant.
The second one's amazing.
No. If you haven't seen it and you're okay with herding cats.
Yes.
He's genius. And so my solution always, you have these scenes in his life where you don't have footage. And my solution was do recreations, and I would storyboard stuff, put it in the movie. And then I'd come back the next morning and he would put in something from Secret of My Success. And I go, well, you can't do that. And then I would put stuff back, and then we'd do all of it. So there's a scene of, the first scene where he's waking up in the hotel room, and I shot that in Vancouver, but he turns, and he wakes up, and it's a shot from Secret of My Success, and then back to the hotel room. So it's very experimental for us, anyway. We felt like we were trying something kind of fun.
What did you learn about him as a subject versus the other ways that you deal with nonfiction? Because your nonfiction has actually been quite remarkably diverse. You've done you won an Oscar for a film which ostensibly was a presentation. Right. You have done
slideshow.
You're right, PowerPoint the film.
Yeah. Best slideshow turned into a documentary ever.
Right, and you've done some incredibly dark stuff. I can't be this close to you and say you wrote goddamn Deadwood, let alone
directed.
Excuse me. Worked on Deadwood. Worked on incredible television shows, fictional stories. So this feels to me, on the outside, as a culmination of so much of what you did before. That you're presenting ideas that we think we know already in a new context. We think we know Michael J. Fox. We think we understand what he's going through, and this presents us a new way. Does this feel for you, in some ways, a shift in your own filmmaking?
Completely. And there was about a 10-year period where I lived a double life. So 3 young kids in private school, and I had to make money. And the documentaries didn't pay for it. So I would work for 9 months on a documentary, like Ink Me a Truth, and then go do a television pilot. And then do Waiting for Superman, and then do a television. And I would do that every year. And the people in the television world didn't care or know about my documentaries, and people in the documentary world didn't care about and I would just go back and forth. But the skills in each of those things were separate until this film. And I started to combine the language of those two things. And that's part due to an incredible moment in documentaries where, unlike in Hollywood where features are stuck, like Marvel movies, and then independent movies are once in a while you have one that's pretty unique and breaks out. But the form is kind of, there once in a while a good director, or a good script, but mostly I think that form is stuck. Docs are just exploding in the best way, and shape-shifting and everything. So this was that for me. It's like, let's just blow it up and just do something wild.
I don't want to get too inside baseball here, but we're going to. This is an Apple film. Apple has been, of the streamers, one of the ones that's most committed to both theatrical experiences and celebrating the theatrical experience,
Yes.
but also recognizing that streaming actually allows people who may not be engaged in the theatrical way to actually learn. I'm wondering if you could talk about, as a creator, what it's been like navigating this new normal where you have the support of these billion-dollar companies that are still managing to fund and find ways of telling stories that otherwise would have been much more niche. So they had the ambition of being cinematic, but maybe wouldn't have found the audience.
It's not all bad and it's not all good.
Oh, like your movie.
Well, I mean, yeah. Yeah.
It's the subject of the movie. Parkinson's bad. The movie's great. Let's be clear. I was referring to the hybrid. Your movie, man. What the fuck?
I prefer hating myself more.
Jews, what are you gonna do?
Right. Thank you. Look, there was a time 20 years. My father was a documentarian.
Right.
He made wonderful documentaries, and sometimes the only way to see his documentaries was to drive to the museum where they played. Mm-hmm. Or mail order a DVD if you're lucky, and put $50 in a check to my sister. No shit. Grace is like stuffing the envelope, and you get it 6 weeks later. Now you can look up a movie and see almost anything you want. Mm-hmm. And for a documentarian, that access is amazing. So that's a really good thing. And that has offered that has allowed an audience that's hungry for documentaries. I could not have imagined the audiences we have now, and that has spurred that growth. That creative surge that I'm talking about. But like, there's nothing like tonight. The ability to sit in a room together. You know, Walter Murch, the great editor who did Apocalypse Now, writes about, we as humans need to sit in a dark room watching stories like we used to sit in front of by the fire watching flickering light. And so I mourn the loss of that. So back to this festival. I love that this festival exists. I love that we're here tonight. And I'm just determined to just keep showing the movie this way as much as I can.